Like me, it seemed my younger sister was reborn. In our past life, she was obsessed with the golden boy of the elite circle. She would ditch classes, get into fights, and race through the streets at night all for him. In the end, she died for him in a storm and blamed me for all of it. After her rebirth, she manipulated our parents into transferring me to his class, notorious for being the worst in school. Sis, this time, it's your turn to get bullied by him, to fall for him, to suffer like I did. I just smiled. Coming back to life didn't make her any smarter. Even if she lived 100 lifetimes, she would never be a match for me. It appeared that I got tricked into coming home under the pretense of a family dinner, only to be beaten to death by my adoptive parents in my past life. Before I died, their twisted faces loomed over me. We only raised you for Stacy. Now that she's gone, what reason do you have to live? A baseball bat struck my head. Warm blood streamed down, blurring my vision. I suddenly opened my eyes in the darkness. The sharp clarity of my surroundings stunned me for a moment. Bright sunlight filled the familiar room. My adoptive mother and younger sister sat right in front of me. Then, my mother's anxious voice rang out. Stacy, what's going on? Your teacher called, saying you applied to transfer classes. And not just any class, but the worst performing one in the entire grade? Across from me, Stacy Lowe lifted her head slightly, hesitating. Transfer classes? She blinked, as if finally processing what was happening. Her gaze flickered around the room, before she raised a hand and pointed at me. Mom, the teacher must have misunderstood. I was saying my sister should transfer, not me. There are so many failing students in class 13, and since my sister has always been kind and helpful, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to lend them a hand. In our past life, Stacy had fallen for Nicholas Scott at first sight. Barely 2 months into the school year, she cried and begged to transfer into his class, Class 13, the lowest ranked class in the entire grade. Our mother had always indulged her, so she gave in and approved the request. Stacy then spent the next 7 years entangled with Nicholas. In the end, she even lost her life for him, drunk driving in the middle of a storm. In my past life, I had almost no interaction with Nicholas. Apart from a few brief conversations after graduation, our paths barely crossed. Yet, Stacy saw me as a thorn in her side. She stubbornly believed that the reason Nicholas kept breaking up and getting back together with her was because he had feelings for me. She thought I was his so-called first love. Now, as I met her gaze, filled with barely concealed malice and resentment, everything became clear. So, Stacy had also been reborn. Hearing her words, my adoptive mother turned to me. Stacy is right. I'll go to the school today and arrange your transfer. Her tone left no room for argument. I knew that, out of obligation for the kindness my father had once shown them, the Lows had taken me in. But from the very beginning, they never truly saw me as their daughter. To them, I was just a convenient accessory for Stacy to order around. In my past life, when Stacy insisted on transferring classes, my adoptive mother got worried and originally planned to have me follow along. But Stacy refused adamantly, so my adoptive mother gave up on the idea. Later, Stacy had even come to gloat. Don't think I don't know. When you competed in that violin contest, Nicholas skipped class to watch you. Did you really think I'd let you stay in the same class as him every day? I simply looked at her foolish expression and said nothing. Nicholas came to watch my violin competition? What a joke. He probably didn't even know how many strings a violin had. That rumor? I was the one who subtly spread it. My only goal was to keep Stacy from dragging me down with her. But now, she had been reborn. If she wanted to play games, I could simply change the rules and play on a different field. That night, Stacy slipped into my room without making a sound. In this house, my room had no lock, because I wasn't allowed any privacy. Stacy stood by my bed, her icy, resentful gaze sweeping over me inch by inch. Then, suddenly, she laughed. Sis, this time, it's your turn to get bullied by him, to fall into a twisted love-hate relationship with him. I wasn't sure if she arranged something in advance, but the next morning, the moment I stepped into class 13 with my backpack, a book came flying straight at me. I tilted my head slightly and dodged it. A lazy voice sounded from up ahead. Who said you could dodge? Nicholas lounged in his chair, legs crossed and propped up on the desk, looking at me with an air of arrogance. Forget it, I'll give you a chance. Pick up the book, hand it to me respectfully, and let me throw it again. Then I'll let you off for the morning. Hearing his words, my eyelashes fluttered slightly. I bent down, picked up the book from the floor, and walked toward him, step by step. The guy standing beside him smirked, their eyes filled with disdain and undisguised malice. I smiled. Like this? Without warning, I swung the book, its hard spine slamming viciously into his nose. Ah! Nicholas shot up from his chair, yelling in pain. He clutched his nose, blood streaming down his fingers. Then, suddenly, he flashed me a cold, sinister smile. You shameless woman, you dared to hit me? You're done for. The guys around him looked furious, ready to close in on me. Fortunately, at that moment, the teacher walked into the classroom. This is our new transfer student, Lucy Lowe. She placed second in the entrance exam. I hope everyone gets along well and learns from her. Oh, an honor student. Nicholas let out a slow, mocking laugh. Don't worry, teacher. We'll make sure Lucy feels right at home. His methods of bullying were nothing new. The same tired cliches straight out of those overused school drama plots. Planting thumbtacks on my chair, tossing dead snakes and rats into my desk drawer. I simply removed the tacks. And when I found the dead snake and rat, I grabbed them without a hint of emotion and threw them right into Nicholas' lap. He turned pale with fright. When he realized these tricks didn't work on me, he resorted to the most straightforward method, violence. That afternoon, as school was letting out, I flipped open my math workbook and found a small slip of paper inside. "They're planning to take you to the equipment room." I stared at the note for a few seconds, then crumpled it and tossed it into the trash. Who wrote it? In my past life, I heard that class 13 was full of hopeless students who gave up on their studies. But after transferring here in this life, I realized that wasn't entirely true. The students in class 13 were split into two factions. Aside from Nicholas and his gang of bullies, most of the remaining students were just ordinary kids struggling with poverty or personal hardships. Their space to study and even exist were nearly crushed under the weight of Nicholas and his followers. I scanned the sparsely occupied classroom. Eventually, my gaze landed on a girl sitting diagonally behind Nicholas, Sophie Reed. The moment our eyes met, she panicked and quickly looked away. I understood immediately. Acting as if I hadn't noticed, I picked up my backpack and stood up. "Hey, Lucy." She hesitated for a long time before finally calling out to me. "We'll walk home with you after school." The girls sitting beside her mustered their courage and looked at me, determination flickering beneath their nervous expressions. I met their gaze in silence for a moment. I suddenly curled my lips into a faint smile. "It's fine. Don't get yourselves involved." The moment I stepped out of the classroom, Nicholas and his lackeys shoved me into the equipment room at the far end of the field. Inside, I was met with a painfully familiar face, Stacy. Nicholas stood beside her, tilting his chin toward me. "So, this is the so-called sister who thinks she can throw her weight around just because your family owes her a favor?" Stacy responded indifferently, then added, "But you shouldn't bully her like this. I don't want to become someone like her." She played the part well, stubborn, aloof, and full of self-righteousness. A far cry from the girl in my past life who once sobbed and begged Nicholas not to break up with her. She must have learned something after reliving her life. Nicholas was the kind of bastard who only grew more interested when he was ignored. Sure enough, at her resistance, his gaze softened with a hint of admiration. Stacy took a deep breath, then sighed as if trying to reason with him. "Besides, my sister has spent years studying the violin. Her hands are the most valuable thing she has." Nicholas cut in with a sneer. "The more valuable something is, the better it looks when it's destroyed, don't you think?" He waved a hand at the two guys holding me down. "Do it here. Break her fingers, one by one. I want to make sure she never plays the violin again." At his words, the air in the room turned suffocating. A triumphant gleam filled Stacy's eyes, barely concealed beneath her indifferent expression. They shoved me roughly toward the parallel bars, grabbing a heavy dumbbell from the floor. Just as it was about to come crashing down, I spoke. "Idiots, what did you just say?" I met Nicholas' gaze with a smile. "If I were you, I'd think twice before stirring up trouble at school, especially with the Scott family's stock distribution hanging in the balance." His eyes widened in an instant. I silently counted down in my head. 3, 2, 1. The door to the equipment room burst open with a loud kick. But the people standing in the doorway weren't the ones I had arranged.